The money was for a business venture. That's what Kyle had called it, with the kind of swagger that made you feel like his big idea might actually work. He'd shown up at my apartment with a bottle of cheap whiskey and a deck of index cards filled with messy diagrams and buzzwords like synergy and disruption. The plan? An artisanal soap line made from, and I quote, the most underappreciated resource of the 21st century, goat milk. I'd laughed so hard I nearly choked on my drink. But Kyle was serious. He said he had a supplier lined up, some goat farm in the middle of nowhere. He even had a name, Goat Goods. For all his quirks, Kyle had charm in spades, and when he said he'd pay me back in 6 months, tops, it felt less like a gamble and more like helping a friend chase his dream. So I gave him $3,000. At first, I was excited for him. He'd send me updates, photos of soap molds, bottles of essential oils, and once, a selfie of him holding a goat that looked alarmingly unimpressed. But then the updates slowed. When I asked how things were going, he'd respond with vague optimism, working out some kinks, or big things coming soon. It didn't take long before the updates stopped altogether. Meanwhile, Kyle's social media told a different story. He was out every weekend, bar crawls, karaoke nights, and, most insultingly, a weekend trip to Vegas. I let it slide the first few times, telling myself he needed to blow off steam. But then he posted a picture of himself in a cabana, sunglasses on, sipping a margarita. The caption? Work hard, play harder. I sent him a text that night. Hey, hope you had fun in Vegas. Any updates on the business? He responded hours later. Oh man, you wouldn't believe the networking I did out there. Big moves happening soon. Networking. Right. At a pool party. 3 more months passed. By then, I was starting to feel like a sucker. I asked Kyle to meet up, hoping to get some clarity. He showed up late, of course, wearing a leather jacket he definitely couldn't afford. What's up, man? He asked, sliding into the booth like nothing was wrong. What's up? I repeated, trying to keep my voice steady. What's up is it's been 9 months, and I haven't seen a single cent, or bar of soap, for that matter. Kyle sighed, like I was some overbearing parent nagging him about his grades. Dude, I told you, these things take time. Startups don't just explode overnight. I leaned back, crossing my arms. Then maybe don't explode my money on trips to Vegas. His smile faltered. Okay, ouch. That was kind of a business trip. Kind of. Look, I get that you're frustrated, but you have to understand. I'm building something here. Rome wasn't built in a day. Rome also didn't blow its budget on bottle service. Kyle rolled his eyes, which did nothing to help his case. You're acting like I'm some kind of freeloader. I didn't ask you to bankroll my life. I asked you to invest. Right. And where's my return? Jesus, man. You sound like a corporate fat cat. This is why I hate dealing with money stuff. Money stuff. As if I was the unreasonable one for wanting accountability. The conversation ended with him assuring me, yet again, that things were about to turn around. But they didn't. The final straw came a few weeks later. I was walking past a boutique downtown when I spotted Kyle inside, holding up a jacket that could have paid for a semester of college. I stopped in my tracks, debating whether to confront him. Before I could decide, he looked up and saw me. His face froze for a split second, and then he had the audacity to wave like this wasn't wildly awkward. I went inside, my heart pounding. Kyle, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. What the hell are you doing? He glanced at the jacket, then back at me. Shopping. With what money? My money? Kyle groaned, handing the jacket back to the cashier like I just ruined his day. It's not like that. I've got things under control. Do you? Because it seems like the only thing you're building is your wardrobe. Why are you making this so weird? He snapped. It's not like I've forgotten about the loan. You'll get your money. But maybe try trusting me for once. Trust you? Kyle, you're buying designer jackets when you can't even pay me back. Do you have any idea how disrespectful that is? Oh, come on. It's not like you're struggling. You've got a good job, savings, everything. I'm out here hustling, trying to make something of myself, and all you care about is your stupid loan. Stupid loan. My head spun. You begged me for that money, Kyle. You said you needed it to make rent, And now you're acting like I'm the villain for wanting it back? He laughed bitterly. Wow. So this is what friendship means to you. A damn price tag. Don't turn this around on me. I believed in you, and you're taking advantage of that. Well, maybe next time don't invest if you're not willing to take the risk. I stood there, stunned, as he walked out without so much as an apology. That was 3 months ago. We haven't spoken since, and I doubt I'll ever see that $3,000 again. Part of me wonders if I overreacted, but another part feels like I let him off easy. When I saw Jack's name on my screen, I knew 2 things. First, he wasn't calling to catch up, and second, whatever he wanted, it was going to mess up my plans. Jack didn't call for small things. My older brother was a Category 5 hurricane disguised as a charming, slightly chaotic man-child. I debated ignoring the call. After all, the kids were already in their pajamas, the living room was a wreck, and I still had a sink full of dishes waiting for me. But then the guilt set in. He was my brother. If I didn't pick up, I'd spend the rest of the evening convincing myself he was dead in a ditch. So, with a sigh, I answered, "Hey, Jack." "Hey, you." He sounded upbeat, which meant trouble. "Listen, you're not gonna believe this. I got a last-minute opportunity to play in this big poker tournament in Vegas. Huge prize pool. Big names. It's a career changer." I blinked. "Poker? Since when are you serious about poker?" "Since always. Come on, Katie. You know I've got the skills. I just need one break." He was talking fast, almost breathless, and I could feel the wheels turning in his head. "So, here's the thing. I need a favor. It's not a big deal, but it'd mean the world to me." Here it came. The twist in Jack's hurricane path. "What is it?" "I need you to take Moose." Moose. His oversized, slobbery Saint Bernard who treated every piece of furniture like a chew toy and barked at anything that moved, including his own reflection. "For how long?" I asked, already regretting the question. "A week, maybe 2. Tops." "Jack, you know I can't. The kids have school. Alex is traveling for work. I can barely keep up as it is. Moose is like having another toddler, except he weighs 150 pounds. Come on, Katie," Jack pleaded, his voice dropping into that familiar mix of desperation and charm. "You're always saying family sticks together. This is my shot. My big break. You said that about the food truck and the sneaker flipping business. And that time you wanted to start a surfboard company even though we live in Indiana. Okay, but this is different," he insisted. "This is the one. I can feel it." I sighed and pressed my fingers to my temples. "Jack, I want to help you. I do. But this isn't just about me. The kids." "Don't give me that," he snapped, the charm gone in an instant. "You think I don't know how hard your life is, Miss Perfect Suburban Mom? You've got a house, a family, stability. I'm out here grinding every day, trying to make something of myself, and all I'm asking for is a little support." "Support?" I couldn't keep the edge out of my voice. "You mean cleaning up Moose's messes and dealing with his constant barking while juggling my own chaos? That's not support, Jack. That's me bailing you out. Again." "Well, excuse me for thinking you'd have my back," he shot back. "You're unbelievable. You've got everything you ever wanted, and you can't even spare a week to help me." "That's not fair," I said, my voice low but firm. "I've worked hard for what I have, Jack, and I've helped you more times than I can count. But I can't sacrifice my sanity and my kids' peace of mind every time you come up with a new scheme." There was a long pause, and when Jack spoke again, his voice was cold. "Fine. Forget I asked. I'll figure it out. Like I always do." "Jack?" But he'd already hung up. I stood there staring at the phone, a familiar cocktail of anger, guilt, and frustration churning in my gut. I knew he was upset, and I hated being the cause of that. But I also knew I wasn't wrong. I couldn't keep setting myself on fire to keep him warm. That night, after I'd tucked the kids into bed and finally finished the dishes, I sat down with a glass of wine and tried to make peace with my decision. Jack had always been the dreamer, the risk-taker, while I was the steady one, the fixer. But lately, I've been asking myself, where does it end? At what point does helping him become enabling him? The next morning, I woke up to a series of texts from Jack. "Forget it. Moose is coming with me. I'll figure it out. You're unbelievable, Katie. Seriously, you think you're better than me, don't you? Just because you're playing house in your perfect little life. I stared at the screen, my jaw tightening. His words stung, but they also confirmed what I already knew. No matter what I did, it wouldn't be enough. A week later, Jack posted a photo from Vegas on social media. He was grinning, holding a stack of poker chips with Moose sitting proudly beside him in a ridiculous pair of sunglasses. The caption read, "Big risks, big rewards. Family who shows up? Priceless. Paw Prince Red Heart." I didn't comment. I didn't call. I told myself it was because I was too busy, but the truth was, I didn't know what to say. And now here I am, writing this and wondering if I really am the bad guy. Should I have taken Moose and let my life fall into chaos for a couple of weeks? Should I have just sucked it up, knowing how much it meant to Jack? Or was I right to finally draw the line, even if it meant damaging our relationship? We'd gone to pick out produce and ended up in an argument over melons. Not the kind of argument where you yell, but the sort where the tension hums like static in the background. Jamie was holding a cantaloupe, giving it their trademark, press every inch like it's a magic orb treatment, while I stood next to them with a watermelon under my arm like a football. "We don't need a watermelon," Jamie said. "It'll take up half the fridge." "It's summer," I replied. "You have to have watermelon in the summer." "Or," Jamie said pointedly, "we could get fruit that's practical and doesn't need its own apartment." That was the day we officially entered a Cold War over personal preferences. It wasn't about the fruit, obviously. By the time we left the market, with a bag of oranges we didn't even argue about, the real issue bubbled up. Jamie wanted a cat. I wanted a dog, and neither of us could let it go. "Okay," I said that night, watching Jamie cradle their tea as we sat on the couch. "What if we just get both?" Jamie looked at me like I'd suggested keeping a raccoon. "That's chaos. Cats and dogs hate each other." "That's a myth. Have you seen those videos of cats cuddling dogs? They're best friends half the time." "They're best friends when the dog's too exhausted to care," Jamie said. "You're not bringing home some lazy golden retriever. You want a German shepherd, don't you?" I hesitated. "Or, like a husky. Something big enough to hike with." Jamie sipped their tea, their expression unreadable. I braced myself for the rebuttal. "I grew up with cats, Sam," they said softly. "They're perfect. Clean, quiet. No barking, no jumping. Plus, they don't chew your shoes." "Dogs are loyal," I countered. "And fun. They're not just around like cats. They're your partner. A cat won't pull you out of a river if you're drowning." Jamie raised an eyebrow. "When was the last time you almost drowned?" "That's not the point." I threw up my hands. "They try, though." Jamie set their tea down. "Okay, here's a hypothetical. Imagine you've had the worst day at work. Your boss yelled at you. Traffic sucked. And you came home to find we're out of milk. Do you want a dog jumping on you and demanding attention? Or a cat purring and sitting quietly in your lap?" I didn't answer right away because I knew the answer wasn't as black and white as I wanted it to be. What if the dog knew you had a bad day and just lay next to you, letting you cry it out? Jamie laughed, and not in the way that made me feel good. "Oh, sure. Because dogs are famous for respecting personal space." The thing is, Jamie wasn't wrong, but neither was I, and that was the problem. The next day, I tried to prove my point by showing Jamie videos of adventure dogs on TikTok. Huskies pulling sleds, labs jumping into lakes, even a Shiba Inu wearing sunglasses on a paddleboard. "Look how much fun this is. We could take a dog camping. It'd be great." Jamie squinted at the screen. "That dog looks miserable. I bet it'd rather be at home." "Not every animal is a couch potato, Jamie." "No, but I am." That's when it hit me. This wasn't just about cats versus dogs. It was about us. Jamie wanted a pet that mirrored their ideal life. Serene, independent, peaceful. I wanted one that matched mine. Active, full of movement and curiosity. I started to wonder, not for the first time, if this whole disagreement was exposing something deeper. Some fundamental incompatibility we'd been too distracted to notice. But then, later that week, Jamie came home from work holding something unexpected. A flyer. "Cat yoga," it read, with a photo of a smug-looking tabby perched on someone's back mid-downward dog. Jamie was glowing. "They're doing it this weekend. We should go." I stared at them. "You want me to do yoga? With cats?" "You want me to hike with dogs," Jamie countered. "Fair's fair." I couldn't argue with that. So, on Saturday, we showed up to a dimly lit studio filled with people in leggings and cats in varying stages of disinterest. Jamie was in heaven. I, on the other hand, spent most of the hour trying not to step on tails while attempting to fold myself into positions my body clearly wasn't designed for. At one point, a fluffy gray cat climbed onto my stomach while I lay in corpse pose, and Jamie snapped a picture. "See," they whispered. "Perfect." Later that afternoon, we drove to a dog park near my favorite hiking trail. If I did yoga, I told Jamie as we walked toward the gate, "You're walking a dog?" Jamie didn't even hesitate. Deal. The park was chaos in the best way. Dogs of every shape and size were bounding around, tails wagging, tongues lolling. I watched Jamie stiffen slightly as a golden retriever barreled toward them, but they stayed calm as the dog sniffed their leg and then trotted off. We spent the next hour throwing tennis balls and watching dogs leap into the air like furry missiles. By the end, Jamie's shoulders had relaxed, and they even pet a beagle that trotted up to say hi. When we got back to the car, Jamie turned to me. "I get it. I mean, I don't want one, but I get it. And I see the appeal of cats," I admitted. "Even if they're cats." We both laughed. It felt lighter than before, like we'd both stopped trying so hard to win. But that left us with the same question. What now? Last night, we sat on the couch, scrolling through adoption websites. Jamie paused on a photo of a scruffy terrier with floppy ears. Too much energy? Probably, but cute. I hesitated, then scrolled further. What about this one? It was a photo of a tabby curled next to a golden retriever in what looked like a staged Hallmark moment. Jamie laughed. "That's cheating. They come as a pair." I grinned. Maybe that's the universe telling us something. So now we're stuck. Jamie wants peace. I want chaos. And somehow, we both want to make each other happy without sacrificing what we love. Is it possible to do both? Or are we doomed to a life of oranges and no watermelon? The streetlights buzzed faintly, casting yellow pools onto the rain-slick pavement as Hazel stepped off the late bus. Her bag was heavier than usual, loaded with sketchbooks, art supplies, and a lingering sense of dread. She hated walking home alone this late, but the life of an art student didn't leave much room for luxury or taxis. She pulled her hood tighter against the drizzle, glancing around. The neighborhood wasn't dangerous exactly, but it had its quirks. Most of the buildings were old, their windows cracked or boarded up. A few had stood empty for years, their faded "for sale" signs barely clinging to rusty gates. It wasn't until Hazel passed the old theater that she noticed something odd. The building, abandoned for as long as she could remember, had a faint light glowing from inside. Not the warm flicker of squatters' fires, but something colder, sharper, like the pale blue of an old CRT screen. Curiosity warred with common sense, and predictably, curiosity won. She slowed her pace, peering through the grimy glass doors. Inside, the lobby was a ghost of its former self, with crumbling plaster and tattered velvet ropes draped limply over tarnished brass stanchions. But the light, she could see it more clearly now, came from deeper within, spilling out of the theater's main doors. Hazel hesitated. Every horror movie instinct screamed at her to keep walking. Instead, she reached for the door handle. It was unlocked. The moment she stepped inside, the city's sounds, rain, distant traffic, the occasional shout, vanished, swallowed by the oppressive silence of the theater. Her footsteps echoed as she moved toward the source of the light, her fingers trailing over peeling wallpaper. She pushed open the heavy theater doors and froze. The auditorium was alive. Not with people, no, the seats were empty, but with an almost electric energy. On the stage, an old film projector whirred to life, casting jittery black and white footage onto the tattered screen. Hazel squinted, trying to make sense of the grainy images. It wasn't a movie, exactly. The footage was disjointed, like someone had stitched together random moments from forgotten reels. A woman in a sequin dress danced under a spotlight. A man in a bowler hat tipped his hat to the camera. Children spun in circles, their laughter eerily silent. And then Hazel saw herself, her breath caught in her throat. There she was, unmistakably her, standing in the very spot where she now stood, her face pale and drawn. In the projection, she glanced over her shoulder, her expression shifting from confusion to terror. "What the hell?" she whispered. The screen flickered. Hazel's projected self took a hesitant step forward, as if walking toward her. The real Hazel stumbled back, her heart hammering. The image followed her movements, the boundary between the screen and the stage blurring, dissolving. "Don't turn around," a voice whispered behind her. It was faint, like the rustling of leaves, but unmistakably real. Hazel's body froze. Every muscle screamed for her to run, but the voice held her in place. "Don't turn around," it repeated, softer this time, almost pleading. Her mind raced. The screen now showed nothing but static, but the faint outline of her figure remained, flickering in and out of focus. The voice came again, insistent but trembling. "Please, don't." Against every survival instinct, Hazel found her voice. "Who are you?" There was no answer, only the growing sense that if she turned around, she would see something she couldn't unsee. "Why shouldn't I?" she demanded, though her voice cracked with fear. The static on the screen shifted, resolving into another image, this one grotesque and warped. A face loomed large, its features twisted like melted wax, its eyes black voids. Hazel's legs buckled, and she gripped the edge of a seat to steady herself. The thing on the screen opened its mouth wide, too wide, and Hazel swore she heard something. A low, guttural hum that vibrated in her chest. "You'll let it in," the voice behind her said, barely audible. Hazel didn't wait to find out what it was. She bolted, sprinting up the aisle and shoving through the heavy doors. The air outside hit her like a slap, cold and damp, but it was real. She ran until her lungs burned, not stopping until she reached her apartment building. That night, Hazel didn't sleep. Every shadow seemed too deep, every sound too sharp. She told herself it was just an abandoned theater, an old projector, her overactive imagination filling in the gaps. But when she finally worked up the courage to sketch what she'd seen, the drawing came out wrong. No matter how she tried to render the face from the screen, the proportions were off, the angles distorted, and every time she looked away and back again, she could have sworn the features had shifted slightly. The eyes seemed closer, watching. She never took the late bus again. For as long as I can remember, my older sister, Vanessa, has been the center of the universe. Not just in our family, but in life itself. She was the star athlete, the straight-A student, the girl everyone wanted to be friends with. And me? I was her shadow. At first, I didn't mind. She was the kind of sister who'd let you tag along to her cool friends' sleepovers or, accidentally, buy 2 ice cream cones so I could have one. But as we got older, her universe got bigger, and I became more of a satellite, always orbiting, never in focus. Vanessa had this uncanny ability to make her problems the problems. When we were teenagers, her bad breakup meant we both had to stay home from the school dance because she couldn't bear the thought of me having fun while she was in agony. In college, her last-minute term paper crisis meant I spent 2 nights proofreading a subject I didn't even understand. But after college, things hit a new level. I'd just gotten my first apartment, a tiny 1-bedroom with drafty windows and questionable plumbing. It was mine, though, and I was proud of it. I'd finally carved out my own little corner of the world. Then Vanessa showed up, suitcase in hand, after yet another temporary breakup with her long-term boyfriend. "I just need a place to crash for a few weeks," she said, flashing her charming smile. "Promise I won't be in your way." A few weeks turned into months. Vanessa made herself at home, taking over my living room, commandeering my closet, and turning my kitchen into her personal smoothie bar. She even started hosting her friends at my apartment, like it was her own private clubhouse. And somehow, I always ended up cleaning up after them. At first, I tried to rationalize it. She was going through a tough time. She didn't have anywhere else to go. That's what sisters do, right? But the resentment started to creep in. I'd come home from work to find her sprawled on my couch, binge watching reality shows with a pile of my snacks. I'd wake up to texts asking me to pick up almond milk on my way home because she'd forgotten again. My apartment wasn't just crowded. My life was. One evening, I came home to find my favorite mug broken and a post-it note on the counter that read, "Oops, my bad." That was the moment. Not the piles of laundry she left for me to step over, not the Wi-Fi hogging, not even the time she used my toothbrush because hers was too soft. It was my stupid mug, the one I bought as a little treat for myself when I signed the lease. I sat her down. "Vanessa," I started, trying to keep my voice even. "We need to talk about this living situation." Her eyes narrowed. "What about it? You've been here for 3 months. This isn't working for me anymore. I think it's time for you to start looking for your own place." She blinked, like I just suggested she move to Antarctica. "Wait, what? Are you kicking me out?" "I'm not kicking you out," I said carefully. "I'm asking you to figure out your next steps. This was supposed to be temporary, and—" "Wow," she interrupted, crossing her arms. "You're really gonna do this to me? After everything I've been through?" I tried to explain. I told her I loved her, but I needed my space. I told her I was tired of feeling like a guest in my own home. But the more I talked, the angrier she got. "You're being so selfish," she snapped. "You think your little apartment and your little routines are more important than me? I'm your sister. I've always been there for you." That was the thing. Vanessa hadn't always been there for me, at least not in the way she thought. Her idea of being there was overshadowing me, taking up space I didn't have to give, and expecting me to be okay with it. But I couldn't say that. Not then. So instead, I just said, "I need this, Vanessa. I need you to go." The next morning, she packed her things. No teary goodbye, no heartfelt promises to stay close. Just a quick fine, and the slam of my front door. I didn't even feel relieved, just exhausted. Since then, things have been complicated. She's been distant, which feels strange after years of being tethered to her every whim. She sent a text last week saying she'd found a place but added, "Don't expect me to forget how you treated me." I keep replaying the conversation in my head, wondering if I was too harsh or if I could have handled it differently. But part of me knows that if I hadn't said something, I'd still be tripping over her mess and losing pieces of myself in her orbit. When I moved in with my best friend Kieran, I thought it was going to be amazing. We were going to be the sitcom roommates everyone envied, splitting bills and binge-watching crime dramas late into the night. And for the first few months, it was exactly that, until the incident. Capital I, italicized, underline it twice. The day I dared to borrow the mug. Now, let me explain the mug. It's this oversized ceramic monstrosity that Kieran bought at some artsy little market. It's painted a kind of lopsided, swirly green with a crackle glaze, and it has "Blessed Bean" scrawled across the front in shaky black lettering. I'd always thought it was ugly as hell, but Kieran treated it like it was the holy grail. He used it every morning for his coffee, setting it on a little coaster he claimed brought out its energy, and washed it by hand as if the dishwasher might corrupt its soul. One Monday, I woke up groggy after a late night and desperately needed caffeine. My usual mug had mysteriously disappeared, probably under the couch, thanks to my tendency to leave half-empty teacups around. So I reached for the mug. I hesitated, but only for a moment. It was just a mug, right? It's not like drinking from it would trigger a curse or something. Except, maybe it did. When Kieran came home that evening, he was in an unusually good mood, humming some tune as he kicked off his shoes. He made it about 5 steps into the kitchen before he froze, staring at the drying rack. There it was, the mug, upside down and dripping water, freshly washed and sparkling. "What the hell is this?" he asked, his voice dangerously calm. I looked up from my laptop, where I'd been half-heartedly job hunting. "What's what?" He pointed at the mug like it had betrayed him. "Why is my mug in the drying rack?" I shrugged. "Oh, that. I borrowed it this morning. I needed coffee." Kieran's face twisted like I just confessed to murder. "You what?" "That's my mug, Sam. My mug. You can't just use it." I couldn't help but laugh. "Okay, relax. I washed it, didn't I? It's fine." "No, it's not fine," he snapped. "That mug is special to me. It's personal." personal?" I repeated, raising an eyebrow. "It's a piece of pottery. It doesn't have feelings." He stormed over and picked up the mug, cradling it like a wounded animal. "It's not about the mug. It's about respect. You don't touch someone's sacred objects without asking." "Sacred objects?" I snorted. "It's not an urn, Kieran. It's a coffee cup." That was apparently the wrong thing to say. His expression darkened, and he set the mug down so gently it was almost menacing. "You know, Sam, this isn't the first time you've done something like this." "Like what?" I shot back. "Borrowed a mug?" "No, disrespected boundaries." His voice was icy now. "You borrow my stuff without asking all the time. My headphones. My charger. You ate my leftover pad thai last week." I bristled. "Oh, come on. You weren't even going to eat that." "That's not the point," he shouted, throwing his hands up. "The point is, it's my stuff, and you don't seem to care." "Are you serious right now?" I stood up, my chair screeching against the floor. "You're blowing this way out of proportion. It's just a stupid mug, Kieran." "Stupid to you," he shot back. "But to me, it matters. And you never bother to think about that, do you? It's always what's convenient for Sam." I stared at him, my cheeks burning with anger and embarrassment. "You're acting like I stole your firstborn or something. Maybe if you weren't so uptight about your precious mug, we wouldn't be having this conversation." "Oh, so now it's my fault?" Classic Sam. Always deflecting, never taking responsibility. I wanted to scream. "Because you're being ridiculous. It's a mug. A mug. Why are you so obsessed with this thing?" Kieran crossed his arms, his jaw tight. "Because my grandma made it, okay?" That shut me up for a moment. He rarely talked about his grandma, who had passed away a few years back. But then my temper flared again. "If it's so precious, why don't you keep it in a display case instead of the kitchen?" "You're unbelievable," he muttered, shaking his head. "I can't talk to you when you're like this." "Good, because I'm done talking," I shot back, grabbing my keys. I needed air, and more than that, I needed to not be in the same room as Kieran. When I got back a couple of hours later, Kieran was in his room with the door shut. The mug was back on its sacred coaster, untouched and gleaming under the soft kitchen light. For a moment, I considered apologizing, but then I thought about the way he'd yelled at me, like I was some inconsiderate monster, and my pride wouldn't let me do it. The tension in the apartment has been unbearable ever since. We've been avoiding each other, communicating only through curt texts about bills or schedules. I miss the easy friendship we had before this stupid fight, but I can't bring myself to be the first to say sorry. I don't think I should have to. It was just a mug. Sure, maybe I should have asked, but his reaction was over the top. "So, Reddit, AITA?" The first time I saw her that morning, I didn't know it was her. All I knew was that some driver had decided to pull a jerk move, speeding up just as I was trying to switch lanes to make my exit. My blood pressure spiked. Mornings were already a slow grind of existential dread and caffeine withdrawal, and this was just fuel to the fire. I turned my head, ready to deliver a laser beam of righteous commuter rage, and then I froze. It was Annie. My Annie. She was grinning, cheeks glowing like a sunrise, and her hand waved out the driver's side window as though she were signaling to a parade of adoring fans. For a moment, time seemed to glitch. My frustration melted into sheer confusion. Was this a prank? A cosmic coincidence? Did she mean to cut me off? Or was she just being Annie? But my survival instincts kicked in before my emotional ones did. Traffic isn't the place for spontaneous gestures or philosophical ponderings. I refocused on the road, merged into another lane, and made my exit just in time. I didn't wave back. I didn't even smile. When I reached the office, a message from her lit up my phone. "Sad you didn't wave back, sad face." I snorted out loud. Classic Annie. Dramatic over small things in the most endearing way possible. I shot off a reply. Could have died, lol. "Next time, don't block my exit." She didn't respond, and I assumed that was the end of it. That evening, though, Annie wasn't her usual chatty self. Dinner was silent except for the occasional clink of utensils against plates. She didn't ask me how work was, didn't tease me about the stain on my tie, didn't even tell me about her latest podcast obsession. I knew something was brewing, but I played dumb because, well, sometimes dumb feels safer. Finally, as we were clearing the dishes, she broke. "So, you really weren't happy to see me this morning?" "What? Of course I was happy to see you," I said, genuinely baffled. I was just surprised, trying to not crash and all. She crossed her arms and leaned against the counter. "You didn't look happy. You looked like I was just another car in your way. And then you brushed me off in your text." I stared at her, trying to find the right words. "Annie, I love you. But the freeway isn't exactly the place for a meet-cute, I was trying to drive. I wasn't asking you to compose a love sonnet on the spot," she shot back. "Just a wave. A smile. Something that says, 'Hey, I see you. And I'm glad you exist.' Is that too much?" I felt a pang of guilt, sharp and unexpected. She wasn't mad about the wave or the text. She was hurt that I hadn't seen the moment for what it was, a tiny, silly slice of connection in the chaos of everyday life. And she was right. I hadn't seen her. I'd seen an obstacle in traffic. "I'm sorry," I said, and I meant it. I was so caught up in the logistics of driving that I didn't think about how it might have felt from your side. Her expression softened, but she didn't let me off the hook that easily. "Do you know why I sped up this morning? To mess with me?" I guessed, half joking. "To be with you," she said simply, "even if just for a second, even if it's dumb and fleeting. Life is boring enough without turning moments like that into nothing." I was quiet for a long time after that. She had a way of cutting through my defenses with surgical precision, leaving me exposed and reflective. The truth was, I'd been letting a lot of those fleeting moments slip by. Too tired, too distracted, too focused on the next thing. The next morning, I left for work earlier than usual, taking a longer route on the off chance that I'd catch her on her commute. I felt ridiculous, like a teenager waiting for a crush to appear at the mall. But as luck would have it, there she was, merging onto the freeway ahead of me, her little silver Honda unmistakable in the stream of dull gray sedans. This time, I sped up. She must have caught me in her rearview mirror because her brake lights flashed as she tapped them lightly, a playful signal. I pulled up beside her, honked twice, and waved like an idiot. She looked over, her face lighting up in delight. The look on her face, like I just handed her the moon on a paper plate, made me realize how much I'd been underestimating the power of the small things. A wave, a honk, a grin on the freeway. They weren't just gestures. They were threads in the fabric of our relationship, holding us together in ways I'd been too blind to see. When we reached the next exit, I gestured for her to roll down her window. "Coffee after work?" I shouted over the rush of cars. She nodded, her smile brighter than the morning sun. And for the rest of the day, every time I thought about her face in that moment, I couldn't help but smile too. It was Tuesday night, which meant the sacred hour of, "What do you want to watch?" The weekly ritual had become less about watching TV and more about testing the tensile strength of our relationship. Mark sat cross-legged on the floor in front of the coffee table, fiddling with the remote like it was a Rubik's Cube. I sprawled on the couch, already braced for battle. "We should watch The Haunting of Hill House," I said, putting it out there like a chess move. I'd been saving this one for weeks, knowing the timing had to be perfect. Mark didn't even look up. "So I can spend the next 6 nights dreaming about creepy kids staring at me from the foot of the bed? No thanks." "It's not just horror," I argued. "It's emotional. It's about family and trauma. People cry during this show, Mark. Cry. Because they're terrified," he said flatly. "No, I need something chill. What about Parks and Rec? You'd like Ron Swanson. He's basically a grumpy detective without the crime." I squinted at him. "Do you think I only like TV characters if they're solving crimes?" Mark didn't answer right away. He just gave me that little smirk, the one that meant yes, but he wasn't dumb enough to say it outright. I threw a pillow at him, which he dodged with annoying ease. "Okay," I said, sitting up and leaning forward. "Let's compromise. You like comedy. I like mystery. What about Only Murders in the Building?" Mark perked up. "Oh, I've heard good things about that. What's it about?" "It's a comedy mystery," I said triumphantly. Three strangers bond over their love of true crime and start investigating a murder in their building. Steve Martin's in it. He frowned. Sounds like one of those quirky, self-aware shows that thinks it's smarter than it is. I groaned. How do you know that? You've never even watched it. Mark pointed the remote at the TV. Fine, let's watch the trailer. We did. He hated it. Said it was too hipster. I accused him of being allergic to clever writing. He accused me of having a superiority complex about my taste in TV. At some point, the dog, sensing the mounting tension, slunk off to the bedroom like a tiny Switzerland. All right, I said, taking a deep breath. What do you want to watch? Mark instantly brightened. The Great British Bake Off. I gaped at him. You want to watch strangers make cakes for an hour? It's soothing, he said, as if that explained everything. And educational. Do you even know how to make a Victoria sponge? Why would I need to know that? I snapped. I don't live in the Victorian era. It's not about the cake, he said, his voice taking on that zen-like quality he always used when trying to sell me on his favorite shows. It's about people coming together. It's about kindness. I stared at him, incredulous. Kindness? On TV? That's the least realistic thing I've ever heard. Mark shrugged. Maybe that's the point. Not everything has to be dark and complicated. Sometimes you just want to watch nice people being nice to each other. Nice people are boring, I said before I could stop myself. He flinched, and I instantly regretted it. I knew I'd hit a nerve. Mark's parents had divorced when he was a kid, and he'd grown up in a house where shouting was the default mode of communication. For him, kindness wasn't boring. It was aspirational. Sorry, I mumbled. I didn't mean that. It's fine, he said, but the light in his eyes had dimmed. He handed me the remote. Pick whatever you want. I felt like a jerk, but I couldn't help myself. I queued up Mindhunter, because yes, I am that predictable, and sank back into the couch. Mark didn't say anything. He just grabbed his phone and started scrolling, his body language screaming, I'm not even watching this. We lasted 15 minutes. 15 minutes of tension, so thick you could have cut it with one of those fancy cake knives they use on Bake Off. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. I paused the episode. This isn't working, I said. Mark looked up, surprised. What do you mean? I mean we're not enjoying this. Either of us. I gestured to the TV, where a serial killer was mid-monologue. You hate this, and I hate everything you want to watch. Maybe we should just, I hesitated, watch separately from now on? Mark blinked at me, like I just suggested we sleep in separate bedrooms. You're kidding. No, I said, even though a part of me hated the idea. Watching TV together was one of our things. But lately, it had started to feel like a chore. Think about it. You can watch your soothing cakes or whatever, and I can watch my depressing murder shows. Everyone's happy. Except we're not doing it together, Mark pointed out. Isn't that the whole point? Spending time together? I sighed. But it's not fun if we're both miserable the whole time. Mark didn't respond right away. He just stared at the TV, the silence stretching between us like a rubber band about to snap. Finally, he said, All right, let's try something else. I raised an eyebrow. Like what? Mark hesitated, then grinned. You're going to hate this. Great start, I said dryly. Psych, he announced, sitting up straighter. It's funny, but it's also a mystery. Best of both worlds. I groaned. That's the one with the fake psychic detective, right? It's so goofy. Exactly, Mark said. It doesn't take itself too seriously, but it still has cool cases. Come on, just one episode. If you hate it, I'll shut up forever. I sighed. Fine, one episode. We watched, and to my horror, I didn't hate it. Sure, it was goofy, and the main character was basically an overgrown frat boy, but the banter was sharp, and the mystery was just intriguing enough to keep me hooked. By the end of the episode, I found myself actually enjoying it. Mark turned to me with a smug grin. Well, it's okay, I admitted reluctantly, but don't get used to this. Too late, he said, throwing an arm around my shoulders. We're officially a psych household now, and somehow that felt right, even if I still thought nice people were boring. We were standing in the middle of the mess, half-empty boxes everywhere, the dog sniffing at a pile of tangled cords like it was treasure. By all accounts, we were supposed to be done packing by now, but here I was, knee-deep in chaos, clutching a stack of instruction manuals from appliances we didn't even own anymore. Across the room, Jordan was flipping through an old photo album, completely oblivious to the ticking clock. "Jordan," I said, my voice tight, "can you help me pack these instead of taking a nostalgia tour?" He looked up, smiling that infuriatingly easy smile. "Why? We'll toss half of this stuff when we unpack. Might as well enjoy it while it's here." I bit my tongue. This was Jordan's MO. Live in the moment, stay flexible, let life flow like some kind of self-help guru trapped in a 30-something's body. And it drove me up the wall. We were moving in 3 days. 3. We didn't have the luxury of enjoying anything, least of all a scrapbook of blurry Polaroids from his high school band days. "It'll be easier if we pack systematically," I said, holding up the manuals like a peace offering. "You take the kitchen, I'll finish the office. We'll label everything, and it'll be seamless." Jordan's brow furrowed as he set the album down. "Seamless?" he repeated, like it was a word he'd just learned and wasn't sure he liked. "Babe, moving isn't seamless. It's messy. You're supposed to wing it a little." I could feel my pulse quickening. Winging it sounded like a nightmare. I didn't want to wing it. I wanted to know exactly where my laptop charger was when we unpacked. I wanted to open a box and see a tidy, labeled collection of items that made sense together. I wanted order. Jordan wanted. Whatever this was. We'd had this tension brewing for weeks, ever since he'd laughed at the checklist I'd pinned to the fridge. "What's this for?" he'd asked. "We're not storming the beaches of Normandy." He didn't understand that the list wasn't just about moving. It was about making the transition feel manageable. For me, planning was a kind of armor. For him, it was just another way to stress yourself out. Now, as I watched him toss a pair of scissors into a box labeled books, I felt my frustration boiling over. "Jordan, you can't just throw random stuff into boxes. How are we supposed to find anything later?" He shrugged. "We'll figure it out. That's part of the fun." "Fun?" I repeated, incredulous. "You think digging through boxes for a coffee mug on our first morning is going to be fun?" "Well, yeah," he said, grinning. "It's like a treasure hunt." A treasure hunt. This man, the love of my life, wanted to turn moving, a high-stakes logistical operation, into some kind of whimsical adventure. And the worst part? He genuinely thought he was helping. But then came the moment that almost broke me. I'd spent hours carefully packing the kitchen, wrapping every plate in bubble wrap, taping the box with precision. When I stepped out to grab lunch, I returned to find Jordan helping by consolidating the boxes. By the time I walked in, the fragile stickers were ripped off, and my meticulously packed plates were now stacked haphazardly on top of a blender. I froze in the doorway, sandwich bag in hand, staring at the carnage. "Jordan," I said slowly, like a parent addressing a child who just colored on the walls. "What are you doing?" "Making space," he said, completely oblivious. "We don't need a million boxes. It'll be fine." Fine. That word again. The one he wielded like a magic wand to dismiss my growing panic. I dropped the sandwich on the counter and walked out, my fists clenched at my sides. I didn't trust myself to speak. Jordan found me sitting on the porch steps 10 minutes later, staring at the driveway. "You're mad," he said, sitting down beside me. "No," I snapped. "I'm furious." He winced, which at least meant he had some self-preservation instincts. "Okay," he said slowly. "Why?" "Because," I said, struggling to find the words, "you don't take this seriously. You act like it's all going to magically work out, and I'm the one who has to pick up the pieces when it doesn't." He was quiet for a long moment. "That's not fair," he said finally. "I'm trying to make this easier for both of us." "You're not making it easier," I said, my voice cracking. "You're making it harder. I feel like I'm carrying all of this by myself because you think planning is optional." Jordan sighed, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees. "It's not that I don't care," he said, his voice softer now. "I just don't see the point in stressing over every detail. I trust us to figure it out, you know?" I didn't know. I wanted to trust us, but it felt like we were speaking two different languages. His trust felt like a free pass to ignore the hard stuff, and my stress probably looked like a refusal to let go. But wasn't there some middle ground? There had to be. Eventually, he reached for my hand. "Look," he said, "I know I'm not as organized as you, and I know that drives you crazy, but I'm trying to keep us sane. You think planning everything is going to save us, but it's just making you miserable. Can we meet halfway?" I stared at him, weighing his words. He had a point, but so did I. Could we meet halfway? Was there even a halfway to meet? The next morning, we compromised. I let him pack his own boxes however he wanted, no labels required. In return, he let me create a master inventory for the shared stuff. It wasn't perfect, but it worked, until we got to the new place and couldn't find the coffee mugs. Jordan grinned at me as he tore through a box labeled miscellaneous. "See," he said, holding up a mug triumphantly. "Treasure hunt." I glared at him, but I couldn't help laughing. Maybe he was right, in his own infuriating way. Or maybe we just gotten lucky this time. Either way, I'm left wondering, AITA? When Dana brought up the vacation idea over pancakes, I should have seen the battle lines being drawn. "So, I was thinking," they started, stabbing a piece of syrup-drenched pancake with their fork. "We haven't taken a real trip in forever. Let's do it this summer." I almost choked on my coffee from excitement. Finally. Yes, I'm so in. I've been dying to go hiking. Like, imagine the Grand Canyon at sunrise, or trekking through Iceland's glaciers. It's gonna be incredible. Dana blinked, confused. I was thinking more. Cancun, all-inclusive resort, bottomless margaritas, spa days. You know, the opposite of scaling a cliff with frostbite. "Frostbite is not on the itinerary," I said, grinning. "But come on, Dana. Don't you ever crave adventure? The thrill of discovery? You're the one who said life's been feeling monotonous lately." Dana snorted. "Yeah, because I want to escape monotony, not trade it for voluntary boot camp." We both laughed, but I felt the subtle tension beneath it. For Dana, vacations were about unwinding, shutting off the world, and just being. For me, they were a chance to conquer it. Every mountain, every trail, every ruin. Two very different philosophies colliding over maple syrup. We didn't argue then. Not really. Dana left the table saying, "Let's figure it out." And I said, "Totally." But figuring it out turned into passive-aggressive Pinterest boards. I sent Dana links to rugged national parks, and they sent me lists of best swim-up bars. I joked about how we could lounge in our backyard kiddie pool if all they wanted was to relax. They countered with a crack about how I'd need a chiropractor after all my fun adventures. Things escalated one night when we were scrolling travel sites in bed. I'd found an incredible itinerary for Peru, Machu Picchu, Rainbow Mountain, even some kayaking on Lake Titicaca. "Check this out," I said, practically buzzing. This trip would be epic. Dana squinted at my screen like I'd shown them a tax form. "That's a lot. Are there any rest days? Like, a day to just exist?" "You exist while hiking," I argued, but they were already pulling up their phone. "Look," they said, shoving their screen in my face. "Look how happy these people look in Jamaica. No hiking boots in sight. Just hammocks and mojitos." We stared at each other, our phones like weapons. And then Dana said, softly, "It's like we're trying to plan two separate trips." I wanted to say it wasn't true, but deep down, I knew it was. Neither of us wanted to back down. I wanted to see the world. Dana wanted to escape it. How do you compromise on that? We let it drop for a while, each of us pretending it wasn't simmering in the background. But a few nights later, we were watching some random movie, and Dana paused it out of nowhere. "What is it about hiking?" they asked, genuinely curious. I blinked at them, surprised. "What do you mean?" "You hate cardio. You've complained about carrying groceries up the stairs. So why does the idea of hauling yourself up a mountain sound like a good time?" I sat there, trying to put it into words. "I don't know, it's different. It's not just exercise. It's the feeling of being out there, away from everything. Like, the world is so big, you know? And I've spent most of my life in a bubble. Hiking feels like breaking out of it, like touching something real." Dana was quiet for a moment, then said, "That's fair. But for me, A vacation isn't about touching anything real. It's about escaping. I don't want to be reminded how big the world is. I want to shrink mine for a little while. Like, no deadlines, no expectations, no effort. Just peace. It was probably the most honest conversation we'd had about this. And it made me realize we weren't just disagreeing about vacation plans. We were clashing over what we needed in our lives. For me, it was expansion. For Dana, it was contraction. Both valid, both hard to reconcile. Eventually, we came up with a tentative plan. A road trip down the California coast, a few days of hiking in Big Sur for me, then a beach rental in Malibu for Dana. It sounded perfect in theory. In practice, though, the cracks showed almost immediately. In Big Sur, Dana complained about the mosquitoes and how their sneakers weren't trail ready. I tried to laugh it off, but every time they checked their phone for cell service, I felt my patience fraying. And when we got to Malibu, I tried to relax. Really, I did. But after 30 minutes of lying on the beach, I was bored out of my skull. I kept suggesting we go paddleboarding or explore the nearby cliffs, and Dana just sighed and said, "Can't you just sit still?" The trip ended with us both feeling vaguely unsatisfied, like we'd compromised so much that neither of us got what we wanted. On the drive home, Dana joked, "Next time, maybe we should just flip a coin or go on separate vacations." I shot back, only half joking. Dana looked at me, their expression unreadable. Would that be so bad? It was such a simple question, but it hit me like a gut punch. Was that where we were? Two people so different that even taking a trip together felt like a chore? I didn't want to believe it. I didn't want to think we couldn't make this work. But as I stared out the car window, watching the coastline blur into city lights, I couldn't shake the feeling that maybe we were too far apart to bridge this gap. So now, as I sit here typing this, I can't help but wonder, AITA for not just giving in? Should I have let Dana have their beach trip and kept my hiking dreams to myself? Or is it fair to want a vacation that feels just as meaningful to me as it does to them? AITA? Last weekend, I was at my parents' house for dinner. A rare family get-together now that everyone's busy with work and life. The conversation was the usual mix of catching up and random tangents, and for once, everyone seemed to be in good spirits. My mom made her famous lasagna. Dad was telling one of his too long fishing stories, and even my brother Mark was actually laughing instead of sulking in the corner on his phone. It felt good, nostalgic. After dinner, I volunteered to help with dishes, mainly to score some points with Mom. While rinsing plates, I noticed Mark slipping out the back door with his phone and a cigarette. I rolled my eyes, but something about the way he moved caught my attention. He seemed jumpy, his shoulders hunched like he was trying to make himself smaller. He hadn't been drinking, so it wasn't that. I figured he was sneaking off for a smoke and to avoid helping clean up. Once the dishes were done, curiosity got the better of me. I wandered out back under the guise of getting some fresh air. I found him pacing near the edge of the yard, his phone pressed to his ear. His voice was low but intense, and I only caught snippets as I got closer. "No, I said I'm working on it." "Yeah, I know what I said. Look, I just need a little more time. Okay? I'll figure it out." His free hand tugged at his hair, his agitation clear. Before I could announce myself, he ended the call abruptly, throwing the cigarette down and stomping it out harder than necessary. When he turned and saw me standing there, he jumped like I just caught him robbing a bank. "Jesus, my name? Don't sneak up on people like that," he barked, shoving his phone into his pocket. "Sorry," I said, holding up my hands. "I didn't mean to eavesdrop. Are you okay? You seemed upset." He laughed, but it was sharp and humorless. "I'm fine. Just work stuff." "Really?" I tilted my head, unconvinced. "Because you look like you were about to either cry or punch a wall." His jaw tightened, and he crossed his arms like a shield. "What do you want, huh? Why do you care all of a sudden?" That stung. "I've always cared, Mark. You're my brother. If something's wrong, you can talk to me, you know? Drop it. Okay? It's none of your business." He turned to walk back inside, but something about the whole thing screamed wrong. Before I could stop myself, I said, "Does this have anything to do with money?" He froze mid-step. That was all the confirmation I needed. "Mark, what's going on? Are you in some kind of trouble?" He spun around, his face flushed with a mix of anger and embarrassment. "You don't know what you're talking about," he snapped. "And even if I was, what are you gonna do? Throw me a couple bucks and pat yourself on the back like a hero? Is it gambling?" I blurted. He flinched. "Mark, oh my God, it is, isn't it?" "Shut up," he hissed, glancing nervously toward the house. "Jesus, keep your voice down." "Mark," my voice softened. "You need to tell someone. Mom, Dad, they can help. Or me if you'd rather. But you can't just keep." "Enough." His eyes blazed with anger now, and he took a step closer, his voice low and trembling. "You don't know what it's like, okay? You don't know how hard it is to dig out when you're already in the hole. I made a mistake. A stupid mistake. But I don't need you swooping in and making me feel even worse about it." "I'm not trying to make you feel bad," I said, my throat tightening. "I just want to help. If this spirals, it could ruin your life." "Newsflash. My life's already ruined," he said bitterly. "Do you think I want to be like this? You, with your perfect job and perfect little apartment, playing savior to the screw-up brother? No thanks." His words cut deeper than I expected, and I didn't know how to respond. He stood there for a moment, breathing hard, before turning on his heel and walking back into the house. I stayed behind, staring at the ground where his cigarette but smoldered in the grass. The rest of the evening was a blur. Mark avoided me completely, and I didn't push it, though it hurt to see him retreat like that. As I drove home, my mind churned with what I'd learned. Gambling? Mark had never been the most responsible person, but this was a new level of trouble. If he was as deep in as I suspected, this wasn't something he could just figure out on his own. But he'd made it clear he didn't want my help, or anyone else's, for that matter. I've spent the past few days going back and forth, wondering if I handled it wrong. Should I have pushed harder? Or was backing off the right call? Should I tell my parents, even if it means breaking his trust? Part of me feels like it's not my place to interfere. But another part can't shake the image of him, pacing and panicked, teetering on the edge of something terrible. So yeah, AITA? I came home from work one evening, tired and craving nothing but my couch and an episode of whatever mindless show would drown out the day. But there it was, slapped on the fridge like a neon slap in the face. "Please do your dishes. We're not cavemen. Brooke." The capital letters screamed passive aggression, and the pink ink? Oh, that was absolutely her way of being nice, while making her point. Here's the thing. Brooke wasn't wrong. I had left a couple of plates and a coffee mug in the sink. I planned to get to them. It wasn't like they were sprouting mold. But Brooke? Brooke was the kind of person who vacuumed 3 times a week and had a color-coded spice rack. She was obsessive, compulsive, annoyingly perfect, and her little pink sticky note felt less like a reminder and more like a declaration of war. I didn't say anything that night. Instead, I ate leftovers directly out of the Tupperware, so no new dishes, and went to bed. The next morning, when I woke up, there was another sticky note. Also, "The trash is full. Take it out. Brooke." I stared at it for a full minute, feeling my jaw tighten. Was she serious? Couldn't she just ask me in person? Fine. If she wanted notes, I could do notes. I grabbed my own sticky pad, blue, because screw pink, and wrote, "Will do. When I get to it. Ethan." I slapped it on the fridge right next to hers. That was when everything went downhill. The notes started multiplying. By the end of the week, the fridge looked like a chaotic patchwork quilt of paper and resentment. Hers, "Leaving your shoes in the hallway is a tripping hazard." Mine, "Your 8 throw pillows on the couch are a suffocation hazard." Hers, "The bathroom sink is not a shaving cream art gallery." Mine, "The shower drain is not a hair museum." The passive aggression became less passive and more aggressive by the day. And then, one fateful Friday, Brooke decided to escalate things. I came home to find my dirty dishes, ones I had fully intended to clean that evening, stacked neatly in the center of my bed. Not on a towel or anything, just directly on my comforter, smearing marinara and day-old coffee stains into the fabric. Brooke was out at her yoga class, so I had a full hour to simmer in my rage. I decided that if she wanted to play dirty, I could too. I marched into the living room, grabbed all 8 of her precious throw pillows, and built a pillow fort in the middle of the kitchen. I even added a sign. Rent is $1,000 per month. No freeloaders. Ethan. Brooke came back, took one look at my masterpiece, and gave me that tight-lipped, fake smile she perfected. Really? She said, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. Really? I replied, arms crossed, like a knight defending his honor. From that point on, it was chaos. Every chore became a battleground. If she vacuumed, I'd accidentally spill popcorn on the rug while watching TV. If I cleaned the bathroom, she'd leave her makeup scattered across the counter like a Sephora had exploded. We stopped speaking entirely, except through our increasingly hostile notes. The worst of it came on laundry day. I'd forgotten my clothes in the washer, a crime, apparently, and when I went to retrieve them, I found them soaking wet in a trash bag on the floor. Her stuff was already spinning in the dryer, smug and warm like it belonged there. Furious, I grabbed her folded pile of clean towels and stuffed them into the freezer. She found them 3 hours later, frozen stiff and smelling faintly of chicken nuggets. She screamed so loudly that even our upstairs neighbor texted to ask if everything was okay. That night, I decided to up my game. I printed out a giant photo of her sticky notes. Yes, I'd been photographing them for evidence, and taped it to her bedroom door with the caption, "The Brooke Manifesto." She retaliated by hiding my gaming controller inside the bag of flour, which I didn't discover until I made pancakes 3 days later. Touché, Brooke. But the thing is, we were both too stubborn to talk about it. Neither of us wanted to be the first to apologize or admit that this Cold War of chores was spiraling out of control. It became a twisted kind of competition. Who could annoy the other more without outright snapping? Then came the weekend Brooke invited her new boyfriend over. A clean-cut guy named Tyler who looked like he flossed twice a day and ironed his socks. I didn't know she had a boyfriend. I found out when I walked into the living room in my boxers and saw him sitting on the couch, looking horrified at the state of our apartment. Because, oh yeah, the place was a disaster zone. Pizza boxes were stacked like Jenga towers, dust bunnies were forming colonies in the corners, and the sink was a biohazard. Brooke shot me a look that could have melted steel. I shrugged and said, "Welcome to the war zone, Tyler. Hope you brought your hazmat suit." That night, after Tyler left, probably to scrub himself clean of the entire experience, Brooke finally broke. She stood in the middle of the kitchen, arms flailing like an angry windmill. "I can't live like this, Ethan. Do you even care about basic hygiene?" I snapped back. "Do you care about not being a control freak? You treat this apartment like a museum, Brooke. God forbid anyone breathe too loud around here." We yelled. We argued. At one point, she accused me of being a walking tornado of filth, and I called her a cleaning robot with no chill. It wasn't pretty, but it was honest, and maybe that was what we needed. By the time we both ran out of insults, we were sitting on the couch surrounded by the wreckage of our passive aggression. Brooke sighed, rubbing her temples. "This is ridiculous." "Yeah," I admitted. "It really is." We ended up splitting a bottle of wine and making an actual cleaning schedule. No sticky notes, no games, just a straightforward list. It's been 2 weeks, and so far, we've stuck to it. The apartment is still a mess sometimes, but it's a manageable mess. Brooke even laughed when I joked about putting her yoga mat in the freezer, so I think we're making progress. It all started with a marshmallow, just a tiny, squishy blob of sugar, but that little thing unleashed chaos like you wouldn't believe. We were at a company retreat, a mandatory team-building weekend at some rustic lodge up in the mountains. Everyone was trying to act like they weren't miserable, but the vibe screamed forced fun. The first night, we had a bonfire. S'mores, awkward bonding, the usual. Sarah, from accounting, kept complaining about bugs, waving her marshmallow stick like a fencing sword. I don't know why I did it, maybe boredom, maybe the 2 margaritas I downed earlier, but when Sarah wasn't looking, I lobbed my marshmallow at her. It landed square on her shoulder, sticking like a sugary bullseye. She shrieked, flailing, and everyone laughed, including Sarah, or so I thought. The next morning, I opened my suitcase to find that all my clothes were replaced with identical pairs of khaki cargo shorts and neon green polo shirts. Even my socks. Sarah was leaning against the doorframe, smirking like a Bond villain, You like pranks, right? Thought I'd give you a wardrobe upgrade. Touché, Sarah. But two could play at this game. That night, I slipped into her room and swapped out her toothpaste with mayonnaise. Juvenile? Absolutely. Satisfying? You bet. The next morning, the entire lodge heard her gagging in the bathroom. She came out, toothbrush in hand. Eyes narrowed. Game on, she hissed. The next prank hit me hard, literally. I was mid-presentation during a team brainstorming session when the chair I was sitting on collapsed. It wasn't an accident. Someone, Sarah, had rigged it so the bolts would give out the moment I leaned back. I went down like a sack of bricks, papers flying everywhere. The room exploded with laughter, and I glared at Sarah, who was hiding a grin behind her coffee mug. I spent the rest of the retreat plotting my revenge. The final night, we had a talent show, don't ask. Sarah was performing some interpretive dance number to a Sarah McLachlan song, which, frankly, was already unbearable. So, right before her turn, I snuck backstage and sprinkled itching powder in her flowy, sparkly dress. Oh, it worked. She was 2 pirouettes in when she started scratching like a feral cat. She tried to power through, but eventually, she bolted off stage, muttering curses under her breath. I thought I'd won, until I got back to my room and saw what she'd done. She'd turned it into an icebox. Every vent blasted cold air, and she dumped a full bag of crushed ice into my bed. Even my toothbrush was frozen solid in a cup of water. I had to sleep in the lobby that night, shivering under a scratchy wool blanket while Sarah snored peacefully upstairs. The retreat ended, but the feud didn't. Back at the office, things escalated. Sarah filled my drawer with live crickets, and I retaliated by swapping her ergonomic keyboard for one of those impossibly tiny toy ones. She buttered the handle of my coffee mug. I put googly eyes on every single item in her cubicle, including her stapler and her framed picture of her dog. It was petty, ridiculous, and honestly kind of fun, until it wasn't. The tipping point came during the company's annual Halloween party. Sarah and I both went big on costumes. I dressed as a pirate, complete with a plastic sword, and she showed up as a witch. At some point during the night, I overheard her bragging about how she was going to top everything with her next prank. That's when I decided to strike preemptively. I snuck into the conference room where the food was laid out and switched the labels on all the dips. Spinach artichoke became guacamole, salsa became hummus, and queso? That became ranch. My piece de resistance? I added a fake label to the chocolate fountain, calling it hot gravy. The chaos was glorious. People were horrified as they dipped their pretzels into what they thought was queso, only to taste ranch. Sarah was livid, claiming I ruined the party. I was too busy laughing to care. Until Monday morning. That's when I discovered she'd gone nuclear. The entire office was covered in sticky notes. Not just my desk, the entire office. Monitors, chairs, walls, even the potted plants. It was a sea of neon yellow, pink, and green. In the center of my desk was a giant poster that read, "You mess with the witch, you get hexed." It took hours to clean up, and I ended up missing an important meeting. That night, I decided to call a truce. I emailed Sarah, suggesting we end the prank war before things got out of hand. She agreed, or so she said, but the next morning, my car wouldn't start. Turns out, someone, Sarah, had wrapped it in industrial-strength plastic wrap. I spent an hour cutting through layers of cling film while Sarah waved at me from the office window. Now, HR is involved. They called us both in for a meeting last week and made us promise to knock it off. But here's the thing. I found a rubber chicken in my lunchbox yesterday, and I know Sarah had something to do with it. When I heard the faint whimper from the backyard, my heart dropped. That's not the sound a happy dog makes, and Barkley, my 7-year-old beagle with a bark that could rival a chainsaw, was always happy. I rushed out to find him crouched under the sycamore tree, his left paw curled awkwardly beneath him, trembling. His tail wagged weakly as if he were apologizing for worrying me. I scooped him up, whispering promises I couldn't yet keep. "It's okay, buddy. You're gonna be fine." My roommate, Nolan, was in the kitchen when I carried Barkley inside. Nolan wasn't just a roommate. He'd been my best friend since college. We'd adopted Barkley together, splitting the vet bills, food costs, and late-night walks like co-parents of a fur baby. Now he stood frozen, spatula in hand, as if I'd just walked in carrying a bomb. "What happened?" he asked, rushing over. "I don't know. He's hurt. We need to go to the vet." Barkley's big brown eyes flicked between us as we bundled him into the car, Nolan driving while I cradled him in the back seat. The vet's office smelled like antiseptic and fear, but Barkley stayed calm, resting his head on my lap. I rubbed his ears, trying to reassure both of us. After an agonizing wait and a series of tests, the vet gave us the diagnosis: a ruptured disc in Barkley's spine. Surgery was the recommended treatment, and it wasn't just expensive, it was intricate and risky. The recovery process would be grueling. Weeks of crate confinement, medications, and physical therapy to help him walk again. Nolan sat next to me in the vet's office, his knee bouncing nervously. "How risky?" he asked. The vet hesitated, clearly used to this question. "The surgery itself is fairly safe, but the recovery can be challenging. There's no guarantee he'll regain full mobility, but without it, his condition will worsen. He'll be in pain, and eventually, he won't be able to move at all." I nodded slowly, the weight of the decision already pressing down on me. Nolan was staring at the floor, chewing his lip. "I'll do it," I said firmly. "I'll pay for the surgery." Nolan looked up sharply. "Hold on. We need to think this through. It's not just about money. What else is there to think about? He needs this. He also needs quality of life," Nolan said, his voice steady but tinged with frustration. "Do you really want to put him through months of pain and confinement just to maybe get him back to where he was?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "You're acting like the alternative isn't worse. Without the surgery, he's done. He won't even be able to stand. And what if the surgery doesn't work? What if he spends the rest of his life in pain because we try to play God? Dogs don't understand hope, man. They just feel what they feel. That's exactly why we have to do this." My voice was rising now. "Because he's counting on us to make the right call. He trusts us to take care of him." The vet cleared her throat, clearly uncomfortable with our argument. "I understand this is a difficult decision. Why don't I give you two a moment?" After she left, we sat in stony silence. Barkley, unaware of the existential debate, licked his paw lazily. "Look," Nolan said after a while, "I love him too. You know I do. But we have to be realistic. The surgery isn't a guarantee. And even if it works, are you ready for what comes next? Crate training all over again, carrying him outside every time he needs to pee, making sure he doesn't hurt himself jumping off the couch?" "Yes," I said without hesitation. "I'll do whatever it takes." Nolan sighed, running a hand through his hair. "And what if it's not about you? What if what's best for him is letting him be comfortable for as long as he can?" His words hit me like a punch to the chest. It felt like he was suggesting giving up on Barkley, and the thought made me sick. "I can't believe you're saying this. I can't believe you're not even considering what I'm saying," he shot back. "This isn't just about throwing money at the problem and hoping for the best. It's about him, what he can handle, what's fair to him." We drove home in silence. That night, I lay on the floor next to Barkley's bed, unable to sleep. Nolan was wrong, I told myself. He had to be. Barkley wasn't just a dog. He was family. You don't give up on family because things get hard. But the doubts crept in. Nolan's voice echoed in my mind. Dogs don't understand hope. Was I projecting my own fear of loss onto Barkley, dragging him through something he couldn't comprehend just because I couldn't let go? The next morning, Nolan and I sat across from each other at the kitchen table, coffee cups untouched between us. "I think we need another opinion," he said finally. "A specialist, someone who can give us a clearer picture of what we're dealing with." I didn't want to agree, but I also didn't want to keep fighting. "Fine," I said. "But if they say the surgery is the best option, we're doing it." "And if they say it's not?" I didn't answer. The specialist confirmed what the first vet had said. Surgery was the best chance for recovery, but it wasn't a miracle cure. The risks were real, but so was the possibility of Barkley regaining a happy, active life. Nolan still wasn't convinced. "I'm not trying to be the bad guy here," he said on the drive home. "I just don't want him to suffer because we couldn't let go." "And I don't want him to suffer because we didn't try," I replied. "In the end, We scheduled the surgery. I covered the cost, though Nolan offered to split it like always. "Just promise me one thing," he said as we filled out the paperwork. "If it gets to a point where he's not okay, where it's clear this isn't working, we'll stop. We won't make him keep going just because we can't face reality." I nodded, though the thought of quitting made my stomach turn. Barkley had the surgery last week. He's home now, confined to a crate he clearly hates, but he's eating well and wagging his tail when I come to sit with him. Nolan and I take shifts with his care, though the tension between us hasn't entirely lifted. Every time I see Barkley struggle to move or hear him whine in frustration, I wonder if Nolan was right. Did I make the selfish choice? Or did I give him the chance he deserved? The rain began just before twilight, soft at first, like whispers brushing against the leaves. By the time I crossed the threshold of my old family home, it had grown into a cacophony of thunder and wind, rattling the windows as if nature itself wanted to join the argument brewing inside. I didn't knock. This was my house once, and I wasn't about to play guest in a place where every wall held an echo of my laughter and tears. My mother looked up from the kitchen table, her hands clasped tightly around a teacup that steamed as furiously as her expression. Grandma sat beside her, lips pressed into a thin line that had once stopped me dead in my tracks as a kid. Now it just made me tired. "Well," my mother started. The word weighted with disappointment. "You finally decided to show up?" I dropped my umbrella in the stand by the door, its black folds dripping onto the wooden floor. "I don't know why you sound surprised. You're the ones who summoned me like I'm some wayward spirit." Grandma snorted, but it wasn't her usual sharp derision. No, this sound was softer, almost regretful. My shoulders tensed anyway. "Sit down," my mother said, her voice as brittle as the lightning outside. I stayed standing. It wasn't out of defiance, not completely. I just didn't want to be drawn into the same old power dynamic, where the chairs beneath them seemed like thrones, and I'd be a child again, dwarfed by their judgment. But more than that, I didn't want to look at the family photo still hanging crooked on the wall behind them, the one where my dad's absence hung heavier than any frame. "You've made quite the mess," my grandmother said finally, her voice creaking like an ancient door. "This wedding of yours has torn the family apart." "No," I said, evenly. "What tore the family apart is that half of you decided to turn my wedding into a battleground. It's not like I'm summoning demons at the altar. It's just a Halloween wedding. It's pagan," my mother spat. Her hand trembled as she set the cup down too hard. Tea sloshed over the edge, a dark stain spreading across the tablecloth. "It's an affront to everything we believe in. Mom, if I believed in demons, I'd have called on them weeks ago to sort this out." My laugh was dry, humorless. "I'm not the one who went rallying the troops for a rebellion. You did that. You and Grandma. And what are we supposed to tell the family?" Grandma's voice cut through my mother's, sharp as a blade. "That you uninvited half of them because they dared to question you?" "Tell them the truth," I said. "Tell them they threatened not to come, so I made it easy for them. You know what they say. Fuck around and find out." My mother gasped, her hand flying to her chest like I'd just insulted the Virgin Mary. Maybe I had. Grandma, however, leaned back in her chair and studied me. I'd never seen that look before. It wasn't anger. It wasn't sadness. It was something in between, a creased and weary expression, like she was finally starting to understand something about me she'd never noticed before. "You always were a stubborn girl," she said, almost to herself. "And you always wanted to break me," I replied, the words slipping out before I could stop them. The silence between us swelled, heavy and electric, until the sound of the rain filled the room again. My mother opened her mouth, but before she could say whatever sanctimonious nonsense she'd been brewing, Grandma raised a hand. Her knotted fingers trembled slightly, but the authority in the gesture was undeniable. My mother fell silent. "You think I'm trying to break you?" Grandma said, her voice soft now, almost conspiratorial. "No, girl. I'm just trying to see if you've got enough steel in you to survive this family." The words hit me like a slap, though not in the way she intended. They were too raw, too close to the truth I'd spent years dodging. My mind flashed back to every gathering, every holiday, Every moment where I'd been told who I was supposed to be, obedient, polite, accommodating. Every time I'd swallowed my anger, thinking it was the price of belonging. "I don't need your tests," I said, my voice low but firm. "I'm done proving myself to people who think love has to be earned. If you can't support me, then don't come. But don't act like I've ruined anything. I'm just cleaning up the mess you made." Grandma's lips twitched, not quite a smile but close. She reached for her teacup, taking a slow sip, her gaze never leaving mine. "You've got fire, I'll give you that. Let's just hope it doesn't burn you out." "I'll take my chances," I said, and for the first time in years, I felt like I meant it. I turned to leave, my steps echoing on the old floorboards. The rain greeted me as I stepped outside, the wind biting at my cheeks. I didn't look back. Not at the house, not at the windows where I could feel their eyes following me. Instead, I focused on the distant hum of life waiting for me beyond the storm. The life I'd chosen to build on my terms. By the time I reached the car, the rain had softened, its fury spent. I sat for a moment, letting the quiet fill the space around me. My phone buzzed, a message from Mark lighting up the screen. "You good?" I smiled, typing back, "Better than ever."